Today I'm going to be sharing 5 books that helped me when I started my spiritual healing journey. This is a 2-part series, so today I'm going to share some of the more story, memoir, autobiography books that really inspired me to start my journey. And then next week I will be sharing with you 5 reference books that helped me get going in learning how to do the practices that are now a part of my everyday life. In case you're new here, my name is Molly Donlin. I am a crystal healer, a trauma-informed Reiki master teacher, and a yoga and meditation guide. And I'm all about demystifying these practices so that you can learn to sense and shift energy and heal on your own terms. If you're new to my story, I started out about 7-8 years ago. I was a total skeptic of energy. Thought it was total hocus pocus, Harry Potter baloney, didn't believe in it, and over the course of many years, many hours of training, and many amazing teachers, I now feel pretty firmly grounded in my belief that energy is totally 100% real. So these are some of the books that helped me get to that place, some of the books that helped me shift my mindset around healing, and some of the books that helped me get out of the place that I was stuck in. The first book I want to talk about is probably the first self-help book I've ever purchased. It's definitely the first book on mindfulness I ever purchased, and that is Work by Thich Hanh. If you are unfamiliar with Thich Hanh, where have you been? He is a Zen Buddhist who is known for bringing mindfulness practices to everyday instances. So some of the core teachings that he presents are that you can bring little moments of your mindfulness practice into every part of your day. My first teacher and mentor trained with Thich Hanh, so his teachings were really infused into my entire practice for the first couple of years that I was studying mindfulness and yoga and meditation. And this was the first book that I reached for to try to bring my practice off the mat and into my life. At the time that I found this book, I was an advocate at a sexual assault support center, and I was slowly starting to break down from that career. I didn't realize it at the time that I was quite as burned out as I actually was, but I was definitely starting to notice the impact that my job was having on my mental health. And on the flip side, the impact that a regular yoga practice and meditation practice was having on my physical, mental, and emotional health. So I started to notice that when I went to yoga every Tuesday night, Wednesday at work was a better day. I was less reactive, I was less angry, I felt better at the end of the day, I slept better, I was able to be more present with my clients and with my colleagues, and I really wanted to understand how I could take that feeling and bring it through the rest of my week, because by Thursday, my Tuesday night practice had worn off and I was back to being kind of an asshole. So this book talks about how you can bring mindfulness into every hour of your day. So when you first wake up, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're answering a phone call, when you're commuting to work, when you're in a staff meeting, when you're in a confrontation with someone. I actually kept this book on my desk for about a year, and every morning I would pick it up and I would read a section. They're all really short, like a page at the most. And that would just set the tone of the day for me. And that was really how I started to bring these practices out of the yoga studio and into the rest of my life, which is how I feel like I fell down this rabbit hole to begin with. Number 2, this is a very specific recommendation. But if you work with a population where you're exposed to trauma in any way, shape, or form, you need to read Trauma Stewardship. This is by Dernoot Lipsky. You can tell mine is well loved. Funny story about how I found this book. So again, I was an advocate. I was very burnt out, but did not realize it. I ended up going to a statewide conference where Dernoot Lipsky was speaking, and I was totally checked out of this conference. I was like, I don't want to be here. It's just better than being in the office. And I actually won this book as a door prize. And when I got this book, I was like, oh my God, great, another book about trauma for me to read. And I was very cynical in my burnout state. But then I realized on the front page is a review from Thich Hanh, who, as I just mentioned, was a huge part of the early days of my practice and was a huge influence on my life at the time that this book found me. And that made me really excited to read this book. And I became even more excited when I found out the author was the keynote speaker at this conference. And I really believe that if this book did not fall into my lap, and if Thich Nhat Hanh's quote was not on the front page, my life would be very different, because I would have totally checked out from this keynote speech. I see this book as what bridged my two interests, because prior to becoming a yoga teacher and really studying mindfulness and energy and everything that I do now, my entire identity was wrapped up in my career as an advocate. I was an advocate through and through. I have a friggin' tattoo for it, my God. And when I started to burn out, I realized I had no plan B. Like, all of my eggs were in that basket. And I just refused to believe that being exposed to trauma day in, day out would have any impact on me, because it couldn't, because I had no other alternative. Laura Vandernoot Lipsky teaches that you should always have a plan B. You should always have a plan B. That way you avoid getting trapped. She also bridged my interest between trauma and mindfulness, because what she talks about is the impact of trauma on the nervous system, particularly secondary trauma and compassion fatigue and just like exposure to other people's trauma in general, and how that affects our nervous system and our brain's functioning. And then she talks about mindfulness and how that affects the nervous system and the brain's functioning. And those were two things that I was very interested in understanding at this time and still love to study today. So I really saw this as a bridge between my identity at the time as an advocate and my interest in yoga and meditation. Before, I didn't really see the connection, but once I found that connection, I jumped down the rabbit hole. This one is a weird one. So on the topic of trying to bridge my interest in mindfulness with my identity, you should understand that I love rock and roll music. Like, in my 20s, and even when I was a teenager, I would go to every concert, all of them. I would go to like 13 concerts a year, and I live in Maine, where most like rock and roll bands do not come up here very often. I've seen everyone from Aaron Carter to Kesha to Wiz Khalifa to Motley Crue to Fall Out Boy, you name it. But I personally love pop punk music, and punk rock music are like my favorite genres. So this book helped me bridge that part of my identity to the identity I was absorbing as someone who meditates every day. It's called Zen Wrapped in Karma, Dipped in Chocolate. Brad Warner is a punk rocker who is also a Zen meditator. And this book is all about how he fuses those two worlds. Like, how do you bring this Zen master into the world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Like, how do you apply those teachings to the reality of being a punk rocker? And for me, even though I'm absolutely not a punk rocker, like, that is not a hat that I wear, I did see some parallels between some of the stories he was sharing and some of the experiences I was having in my early 20s, trying to understand, okay, how can I be like a person in my early 20s who is like going out to bars and like loves loud music and also is like on Tinder, with my love of mindfulness and meditation and my interest in Buddhism at the time. This felt like the most realistic application of these practices that I had found to this point. Because as much as I love Thich Nhat Hanh, it's very like spiritually spoken, you know, it's very like best case scenario with his teachings, versus this book is like down and dirty. Some of the stories he's shared in here just like make me laugh out loud. I think the biggest piece about this book that I loved is it made these practices that seemed like unrealistic to bring into my life, they made them seem real, because he's unfiltered in this book about how he brings this mindset of practice and brings these philosophies into his very punk rock life. This fourth book is my favorite book of all time, period. I actually just recently reread it, and it tracks with being my favorite book of all time. I could not put it down, even though I've read it 3 or 4 times now at this point. It is Into the Magic Shop by James Doty. Phenomenal. Something you should know about me is my favorite niche of books at this point in my life is memoirs written by neurosurgeons who practice meditation and experience near-death experiences. And I'm pretty sure James Doty is the reason why that's my favorite niche. Actually, the next book I'm going to show you is in that niche as well. James Doty is a neurosurgeon. He's also studied compassion and altruism and mindfulness and how it's impacted the brain. And this book is about how he got set on that path. So he grew up with a very difficult upbringing, and when he was 12, he walked into a magic shop and was taught meditation by this woman, Ruth. And through that practice of learning meditation, learning how to quiet the mind, learning how to calm the body, and learning how to visualize and manifest, James Doty went from this kid who basically had no chance to succeed in life and no aspirations to becoming a neurosurgeon, becoming a doctor, getting into medical school when everyone stacked the odds against him, and then making like millions of dollars because that's what he thought he wanted, and then losing it all and realizing what he actually wanted in his life. And I just think it's a beautiful story if you are someone who is looking to bring meditation into your daily life, or if you're looking to understand manifestation and its relationship with meditation, you need to read this book. It is phenomenal. And I love that he not only shares the practices, shares how to do them, like walks you through each of the practices that Ruth taught him, but he also shares what's happening in the brain and the physiological response in the neural pathways during each practice, which I just think is really, really cool to hear. So, as I mentioned, this last one is going to be in that same niche as Into the Magic Shop, neurosurgeons who experience near-death experiences and practice mindfulness. This is Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander. Fan-frickin-tastic. I actually found this book because it was recommended to me for reading Into the Magic Shop. So if you know of other books in this niche genre, like please comment them down below because I'm dying to find more of them. This book is about Dr. Alexander's experience in a coma. He had a rare illness of the brain and was in a coma for something like a week. And he describes what he saw when he was basically dying. My favorite part about this is he doesn't just go into like this spiritual realm of here's what I saw and here's the shapes and the colors and what I felt, but then he rationalizes it with science, like literally takes you down the rabbit hole of like, here's what was happening in my brain, here's what was happening in my body, here's proof that there is another world out there based on his experience and his research, which is just really freaking cool. It's just a fascinating read, whether you believe in the afterlife or not. I think it's a really unique perspective that I haven't really seen in any other book, and it definitely opened my eyes to realizing that there has to be more to this world than we have any idea about it. So there you have it, 5 books that helped me when I started my spiritual healing journey. I will leave them all in the description box below in case you want to check any of them out. Go ahead and leave me a comment of what book has helped you on your journey so far. I'm always looking to add to my library. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss part 2, where I talk about the 5 reference books that I use to learn the practices that are now a huge part of my spiritual healing journey. And in the meantime, I will talk to you soon. Bye!